The net is vast and infinite, so it should come to no surprise that there's a lot of generic war combat-ish free-to-play first-person shooter games out there. So a game based off Ghost in the Shell, possibly the least modern combat-ish franchise I can think of, comes as a bit of a breath of fresh air, to be honest. The unwieldily named Ghost in the Shell First Assault Standalone Complex Online is a team-based online first-person shooter which is currently in early access on Steam. The game was developed by Neopol, a subsidiary of Korean games publisher Nexon, who are also responsible for publishing such games as MapleStory, Mabinogi, Dirty Bomb, and free-to-play versions of the Counter-Strike and FIFA series geared towards the Asian market, as well as the Japanese version of EVE Online. As you might be able to quite easily guess, First Assault, as it shall be known from now on, is based on the Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex franchise and sees you playing as members of Section 9, an elite counter-terrorist organisation whose members are cybernetically enhanced to improve their combat capabilities. I have not actually seen Standalone Complex, so I'm going to be giving the game a totally objective eye during this review. As far as the plot goes, there isn't much of one. All I know is that you're Section 9 and you're fighting terrorists. As online shooters go, the game's quite by the numbers admittedly, but it doesn't really do anything wrong. The guns work fine and all have a nice feel, the maps are all interestingly designed, and the action is fast-paced and fun. Admittedly, controller support is still a bit iffy, as the default layout is a bit weird, and at present you're forced to use toggle iron sights when you're using a controller. In addition, I also had a bit of trouble trying to rebind the controls, so at present it's probably best controlled with a keyboard and mouse. In terms of game modes, there's only presently 3. That's a Team Deathmatch mode, a Counter-Strike-esque Demolition mode, and Terminal Conquest mode, which plays a bit like a cross between King of the Hill and Domination. There's only ever one capture terminal live at any one time, and every time it's captured, it deactivates and another one goes live, closer to the losing team's final terminal. If either team's final terminal is captured or if time runs out, then the game ends. Capturing a terminal also grants you a Tachikoma unit for your team. That's a rolling tank-like machine with a childlike AI built into it. The opposing team can also hack into your Tachikoma to make it easier to destroy. I really quite like this mode, because I don't think I've actually played anything quite like it in any other game. It gives First Assault a little speck of originality when compared to other similar titles. However, the way the game handles experience and progression does make unlocking attachments and weapons a little bit long-winded. Basically, completing a match earns you TP for weapons, attachments, and cyberbrain sockets, the latter of which we'll get onto later. Once the TP bar for a weapon or attachment is full, it becomes available for purchase. You can also purchase other weapons and attachments from the armory without having to unlock them, but the ones you get through TP progression are typically cheaper. You can choose which weapon you want to put TP towards, but attachments for your equipped weapons are always unlocked in sequence. There's 2 currencies, GP and NX points. GP is your standard currency and you earn it by playing and when leveling up, as well as through login bonuses and post-match bonuses. NX points are your premium currency. You can't gain this in any other way than paying real money for them, but the game doesn't really necessitate this in any way, and no matter what weapon you use, they all feel quite balanced, and in the long run it's just a matter of preference which gun you use. Like I've said, unlocking weapons with TP is a bit of a long-winded process, and leveling up can also take quite a while, but each level up does grant you a pretty generous 50,000 GP bonus, which on its own is about enough to buy a TP weapon and some attachments from the armory. On the other hand, the armory weapons are, again, more expensive, and it will probably take a bit of time to earn the required GP for those. Even so, you won't be able to equip all of them at once, since the game only gives you a grand total of 3 custom classes to choose between in-game. There are a couple of other things which give this game a slightly more unique flavour in comparison to other online first-person shooters. For instance, first of all, the Ghost in the Shell setting gives things a little more spice despite the lack of plot. Second of all, there's the Operatives mechanic, which lets you pick different playable characters, each with their own different abilities. For instance, Bato has an arm-mounted missile launcher, and Major Motoko Kusanagi has a therm-optic camouflage, which renders her less visible for a period of time. You start off with one operative of your choice and can unlock up to 2 more, again of your choice, as you play, but all subsequent ones have to be bought with in-game cash. Some operatives also have the ability to use what the game calls skill sync. This is a mechanic which allows operatives to share their ability with other players nearby. This I find is actually quite an interesting mechanic. It allows for much more strategy and planning than in your typical multiplayer baddie shooting game, and it's also really quite useful that multiple players don't all have to be using the same operative to use a certain skill. What's even better though is that each of these operatives, as well as the Tachikoma and Chief Aramaki who gives you your objectives, has their own voice acting provided by the original English voice cast from Standalone Complex, and it's actually quite good.
Do not let them take that terminal, no matter what.
What do I do? I wasn't expecting much from you anyways.
I genuinely really love the voices in this game, especially, oddly enough, the Tachikoma.
Huh?
Its cutesy childish voice has a sort of strange charm to it, and despite only having a few lines, it never really seems to get old. Another interesting, if not yet fully fleshed out feature is the Cyberbrain mode. This allows you to add small, temporary unlockable buffs to your character, which typically last for a few matches. The effects of these range from less fall damage to increased accuracy or a reduced charge time for your operative skill, and even such things as increased strafing speed. These buffs are only presently unlockable through post-match rewards and can't be purchased from the in-game store. This seems like a mode which in the long run could really add a lot more individuality to First Assault, though at present it is admittedly a bit weak. One thing that really surprised me is that, considering this is a multiplayer online first-person shooter, the short snippets of soundtrack you hear and which I've been playing in the background throughout this video are unusually good. I mean, even when you boot the game up, you're treated to this. I don't know about you, but to me, that just sounds freaking awesome. Another pretty cool thing about this game is the way the teams are presented. The team you're on shows up as Section 9 for you, and the opposing team shows up as whatever enemy you're facing on that map. The opposing team see themselves as Section 9, and you as the enemy. I think that's a really quite cool way of presenting it. It allows you to play as the characters you like no matter what team you're on, and also in a way that doesn't really mess up the plot. Not that there really is one. On the other hand, it does raise some rather strange questions in some modes, like why is Section 9 bombing parts of Newport City? All in all, First Assault is an interesting specimen. If you like Ghost in the Shell, it's right up your street, and if you're fond of multiplayer first-person shooters but don't have much money to shell out, this is also a pretty good investment. At present, you need to purchase one of the early access packs to gain access to the game, the cheapest of which is only $3.99, but when it fully releases, it'll be free to play with optional microtransactions for cosmetic items and power-ups such as the aforementioned NX points. But in its current state, I haven't seen much need to pay for anything. Everything seems quite balanced at the present moment, but anything can happen in early access, so watch this space with this game. Since I played the pre-early access alpha version, I got free access to the game right off the bat, but should you buy into it? Well, those who do buy in get some exclusive weapon and operative skins, and on the higher tiers some bonus GP and NX points, but if you don't quite fit into any of the aforementioned categories and or don't care much for weapon skins, I'd wait until it becomes free to play, since it's probably not long now till that happens, and by that time it'll have much more polish. But even if you do buy in, it is a pretty good game and surprisingly stable for an early access release. Notwithstanding a few hit registration problems and a rather variable player base in terms of availability, I haven't encountered any major bugs, so if you do choose to buy in, then you can be assured a pretty enjoyable game with, as of yet, no serious problems. But early access being what it is, this is not a definitive review and the game is still subject to change, but do keep an eye on it for the time being.